Well, Raquel, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to discuss about my book. And this book is entitled as Consumer Behavior, Global Shifts and Local Effects, which is being published by which has been published by Nova Science Publishers in New York. And this book has got one of the unique features that I will be explaining to you later, and basic motivation for writing this book that came from my research activities, which I have been doing right from 1984, and most effectively I have been doing in Latin America right from 2004 in reference to the consumer dispositions in buying, the consumer's personality associated with the global brands, and how the global brands are really making an effect in the local market, considering the preferences of consumers. That was one of the motivations for writing this book. The another one is I have been involved in analyzing the global companies' penetration into the emerging markets. There are many global companies which emerge from the developed countries and which have penetrated into the developing countries, and which we name it as now emerging markets. Particularly, you take an example of India, then China, then Mexico. These are all the countries where you see the global brands have penetrated down to the bottom of the consumer segment. So I have been working on these issues, so that also motivated me to work on compiling all my experiences in the book. Then the another issue is that about the orientation of consumers towards foreign brands, because the consumers are aware that there are foreign brands. Consumers are aware that you see there is a different status of a foreign brand, to have it and to live with it. And therefore, the consumers in the emerging markets are gradually leaning towards the foreign brands, and they do have a greater affiliation, a greater inclination and association with the foreign brands, and that made me to think of this book. Well, as I described in my previous question, that this book is based on my research experiences in emerging markets, more specifically in the Latin American markets. So this book has got a different face, and the face of the book is a research oriented. And the concepts I have discussed in the book, but these concepts are supported by variety of previous studies that have been done, and therefore this book is having a facelift by the research. So if I rightly remember, in each chapter we do have about 70 references from the previous research studies, and the whole book is divided into 10 chapters. So altogether you will be having about 700 to 800 references in the book while discussing many issues, which are also conceptual, and some are very new to the entire consumer behavior, the literature. And another part that makes this book little distinguished, that is a small case illustrations. So whenever whenever I have been doing the explanation of the concepts, I always inserted small illustrations so that you see a reader will have good comfort in reading, understanding and learning the concept that I have mentioned in the book. And the topics, though you see most of the topics in the book, they cover the common textbooks features, but still this book is slightly different because it is having a research orientation and have been illustrated by very brief cases and very brief annotations. In the second chapter of the book, I have discussed that what are the different ways and what are the different strategies to explore consumers. Whenever I talk about exploring consumers, my intentions are largely to penetrate into the consumer psychology and understand what exactly the preferences of consumers are, particularly their choices. So, in this particular chapter, I have largely integrated the global brand's attributes with local preferences, which I call as a convergence. So, you do have a convergence of the attributes of global brands with the choices of customers in reference to their perceived value and in reference to their lifetime value. These are the two values which are very important that converge in a consumer's perception to have a global brand. Then the another issue is that I had very clearly mentioned in the book, which is somewhat an interesting concept that has been raised, that is how consumer brands cater to the consumer culture. And here the consumer culture I have explained with one acronym called ACTION. And that action constitutes awareness, how brands generate awareness to the consumers about their existence, about their utility, about their social value. Then about the comprehension, how brands speak by themselves. Most of the global companies nowadays are emphasizing the brand experience. The brand experience is that how a brand is understood by a customer and how a brand explains itself. So, that is the comprehension. So, first was awareness, second is comprehension. The third is very important in the ACTION acronym is the trust. If I have a good information on brand and if I come across a good experience which is really adding to the value of my perception, I am bound to trust. And as a consumer, if I am trusting the brand, then I look for what exactly is the value for money and what is the lifetime value that a brand gives to me. Then the fourth letter in that acronym is image. Image basically comes from the company's reputation that is associated with the brand. So, the image is one of the factors which is very much associated with the posture of the company, how company is standing in the market. Take an example of Sony. Sony, for all kinds of electronic devices, is considered to be a very high technology led company, and therefore the image of Sony is going to be one of the determinants of consumer behavior. Then coming to the last letter is the navigation. There is an action, and in the navigation basically how the brands or how the company's strategies leads the consumer to gradually lean towards getting associated with the product, with the brand. And in the navigation process, it's very obvious that consumers do have the variety of routes to access the product. So, a consumer is going to get information, consumer is going to get an analysis, he is going to get the fellow consumers' experiences from various sources, It may be internet, it may be blogs, it may be the personal mails, or it may be the grapevine of informal discussions. So, second chapter is more oriented towards discussing these issues, particularly the convergence, then you see the consumer culture in reference to action, and the self-concept styles that largely focuses the zone of confidence. So, self-reference and self-concept, these two are very, very close, which are being treated by the multinational brands in local areas to have their preferences. Thank you, Raquel. This is a very good question, and this is a very emerging question. And the consumer behavior books, perhaps you see, they are not truly addressing this issue, because this is slightly apart from the consumer behavior's perspective. But in this book, I have addressed one of the issues pertaining to the bottom of the pyramid markets, and how the multinational companies are penetrating into the bottom of the pyramid segments. The pioneers and the very leading thinkers in bottom of the pyramid are Gary Hamel, C.K. Prahalad from University of Michigan. Though you see, they have given us the basic idea, but I have further explored with certain experiences, field experiences on the multinational companies. One of the examples I will give you, that how the multinational company has penetrated into the bottom of the pyramid in India. So, that company is Unilever. And Unilever in India, which is known as Unilever India Limited, and that company has penetrated into the bottom of the pyramid segment by developing the most preferred packaging designs, by preferring the prices that are affordable by the segment of the bottom of the pyramid, and also by pushing the product with the preferred mass communication strategies. In the sense, sometimes if the Unilever says that, you see, well, we are going to take a very, very known celebrity for pushing the product, but the issue is that the bottom of the pyramid, the consumer segment, might not be very familiar with that celebrity. So, what happens that, you see, there always creates a gap between what message has been conveyed and how message has been really conceived by the consumers in a very familiar platform. So, Unilever's experience in India has been very good, where it has gone through very utilitarian products, particularly the food products, the toiletries, like you see the soaps, the detergents, and Unilever has also pushed these products through the local dealers, and that local dealers, they had an experience called Shakti. Shakti means it is a force, and Shakti is a Hindi term, but you see they call it as a force. Force is the women force. They use the women distributors who distribute their product to door as direct sellers. They also interact with the retailers, and they are local origin people, and that makes a greater confidence among the people. That's what I was referring to you. In one of my books, I have talked about the consumer culture as action. So, in the action, this bottom of the pyramid strategy, by taking the local distributors to go for door to door canvassing and selling of the product, does match with the concept of action, where you see they create awareness, comprehension, then they trust, image, and they also try to navigate the people that how to buy it. Then coming back to the Latin American experience in bottom of the pyramid segment, the Kraft is one of the company which is penetrating down to the bottom of the pyramid segment. And in this bottom of the pyramid segment, they are again following the same principles of making most preferable packaging. They are introducing the prices that are affordable. They are introducing the communication which is easily acceptable to the consumers at the bottom of the level. So these are the factors which are very closely associated. What I said is the bottom of the pyramid, that is BOP, with action. Cross-cultural impact has increased on consumer behavior as the globalization has increased, because the competition has grown much in the market by the global brands. Now, the cross-cultural impact you can find where there is going to be a shared culture. In the shared culture, which is we also call as intermarket segmentation. In intermarket segmentation, you will be having an attribute where there are many markets that have been segmented in the region, and in each market you have a representation of different ethnic groups. And under such circumstances, one of the important issues is that the cross-cultural impact is generated by communication to the consumers. There has been one study that I did on the impact of media advertising by TVS sticker in America for Hispanic population. So all American products are being advertised on TVS sticker to provide a more familiarity to the consumers of Hispanic origin, and that is creating a greater impact in the minds of the consumers, so that you see the consumers do not just watch a TV advertisement, but they also try to bring the advertisement to the top of the mind. So in cross-cultural, the one issue is that how of their product message, of the brand message, of their company's societies. The most important issue is that how the relativity of consumption is going to be created. That means I am of a different ethnic group, there is going to be another consumer of a different ethnic group. What kind of similarities are there, and what kind of differences are there, and how the differences can be converged, so that you will be having the expanding the universe of market. That was basically one of the cross-cultural impacts, and most of the multinational companies are trying to bridge the gap between the consumption and the gap between the perception. Take an example, what products Mexican consumer he consumes, perhaps it may not be very close with the consumption pattern of a Japanese consumer. But the global companies are trying to elevate both the consumers' behavior so that they come at one platform and they can converge their preferences so that the universe of marketing will expand.